So, good evening, everybody. You're all very welcome to another programme with us, Social Rights Ireland and the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum. And thank you all very much for joining us as we mark International Women's Day, Working Women's Day, or Working Women's Month, or the month of March. It was officially yesterday, but we're bringing people together today to celebrate four great Irish women and all women who are involved in the struggle here at home and away. So it's a real pleasure actually to see so many people here, new faces as well, sharing this space for conversation, for celebration, and for reflection. And I'm especially delighted to say that we're joined by four inspiring Irish guest speakers. We have Patricia Campbell, Dorothy Collin, Carmel Delaney, and Deirdre Murphy. And each of them brings valuable experience and perspective, and we're really grateful for your time, all of you, and your willingness to take part in this discussion this evening. International Working Women's Day isn't only a time to acknowledge the achievements of women, but it's also an opportunity to reflect on how women across different societies contribute, lead, and shape change in ways that aren't always fully recognised. And it's particularly relevant when it comes to the situation in West Asia that you were talking about already there, Deirdre, and in particular Iran right now, because Iranian society is presented by Western media through very narrow narratives, where women are seen mainly through the lens of restriction. And this portrayal of Iranian women completely overlooks the reality of the society and the very active role that women play within it. So, in reality, Iranian women have long been deeply involved in education, in culture, in professional life, and creativity, in resilience, and they continue to shape many aspects of society. So, recognizing that's really important tonight in this moment in time because understanding women's experiences globally requires moving beyond really simplified stories that are engineered to create distorted narratives that deny reality. So, with that in mind, I would now like to introduce our four guest speakers. So, I don't feel like I'm doing a lot of talking here, but they deserve proper introductions. So, bear with me. This is in no particular order. So I'm going to introduce you first of all. Some of you will know Patricia Campbell of the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum. She's with us every week, and not once a week. You're here virtually, but she's always on call for advice and help. Thank you, Patricia, 24/7 nearly. So Patricia is a lifelong political activist. She was very active and she was a very dynamic member of the anti-H block campaign before, but especially during the hunger strikes. Patricia practically toured Ireland during that period, participating in rallies and election campaigns, and she continued to support Irish political prisoners in England during the 80s and in the 90s when she worked and lived in London. And then on returning to Ireland afterwards in the mid 90s, roughly, she did great work within the health unions until joining the newly formed Independent Workers' Union in 2001, shortly thereafter becoming president. And then she became a founding, as if that wasn't enough for her, she became one of the founding members of the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum and has contributed greatly to its work over many years, and she now sits on the Central Committee from where she helped found Five for Palestine, which I'm sure you've all heard of. It's a group gathering support for Palestinian political prisoners held in Zionist captivity. Welcome, Patricia. And then I'm going to continue with the introductions before everyone speaks. We've got Dorothy Collin here. Dorothy, you'll recognise if you've been attending the programmes. She is with us tonight. She's been on the programme before as a guest as well. and her regular contributions at post-programme conversational level have been really interesting, valuable and important. Dorothy is a mother, she's a writer, she's a worker, she's a political activist. She works in many fields, a paid worker and an unpaid worker. She admits to being relatively new to activism, and she has reminded us often in texts and here on the programme that Gaza actually saved her. So, like so many others, she says Palestine woke her up to the cruel realities of imperialism. She's a poet and a writer. You should read her work. It's absolutely stunning. And she always speaks passionately about Palestine while always joining the dots as well. It's not an isolated struggle. So you might have seen Dorothy speak at Leinster House alongside David Hickey and Dubs for Palestine, where she shows up regularly on a Wednesday. And then our next speaker, Carmel Delaney. You're very welcome here, Carmel. Carmel's a tech worker. She's a busy mother of young children. She has a very keen interest in the way that tech is being used as a weapon of war. And then as a worker within the tech industry, Carmel has first-hand experience of how the industry manages its workers and understands the challenges faced by workers who are not unionised. Carmel's very vocal about genocide on the streets, and she's also been really active in neutrality campaigns and grassroots campaigning to protect the triple lock and standing up basically to the whole EU drive for militarisation. And like Dorothy, she sees that there's no such thing as a single issue, that US imperialism and Zionism are at the root of the problem. And the good thing about Carmel, like all of the women here, is that she's not afraid to name that. And then we welcome Deirdre, and we'll invite you to speak first, perhaps, Deirdre, but not without a proper introduction. Deirdre's a lifelong activist, like Patricia, and she was brought up in Carlingford, County Louth. She lived in London in the 80s and 90s, when the Irish community in Britain were under attack from anti-terror legislation that impacted significantly on Irish people living in Britain. She's a frontline healthcare worker, working as a highly skilled theatre nurse. And while living in London, Deirdre campaigned within the London Irish community for housing and social rights. She also took part in the Birmingham 6 and Guildford 4 campaigns to overturn miscarriages of justice and the Draconian Prevention of Terrorism Act at a time when it was dangerous to do so in this atmosphere of anti-Irish hysteria and fear. And as a healthcare worker and a trade unionist, Deirdre continues her activism for social rights and justice to this day. Deirdre's been to Palestine twice, I believe, within the last decade, and she's a tireless activist for Palestine, taking a leading role in the healthcare workers against genocide. I have spoken enough. I'm going to hand you over now to Deirdre, and maybe you can talk to us about your history of activism. I know it's very long. You could probably talk for hours, and where we are at this moment in time and what women really can do and why it's so important to have women involved in political activism. Thank you all, and over to you, Deirdre.
Yeah, so this couldn't be a more important Zoom. You know, when you think International Women's Day and when you look at the amount of women and children being slaughtered, and you look at the school where 100 and I think 90 children, girls, were just annihilated the other day by America. And the United States of Israel is what I call it now, because that's what it always has been, that's what it is, and that's what we're seeing. And to think that for the last 2 years, a classroom of children have been slaughtered every day in Gaza, and that's very hard to get your head around when you think of a classroom of children. You know, when I look at my own daughter who's a teacher, and I think, a classroom every day of children. It is unbelievable. So it's never been more important for women to stand up and speak out, regardless of whether they're in the workplace, no matter where they are. It is just, it's beyond belief. And what shocks me most is the media and the lies that people are fed, and the fact that you work with people and you come in contact with people and you cannot understand that they are not outraged by what they're seeing, by the lies they're being fed. And you just think, I mean, how can you function on a daily basis and just ignore the slaughter? Because this is slaughter. And I think of the medical workers in the last 2 years, that I would have worked alongside in London, like Dr. Aman Albush. He trained in St. Thomas's Hospital and worked there for quite a while. To be lifted, taken into an Israeli dungeon, tortured, and then raped to death. And the Israelis have got away with so much, have been aided and abetted by all the governments, our own government included, is participating in this Holocaust. And I call it a Holocaust because when I saw that young man in Gaza burning alive with an IV drip in his arm, and then when you saw the women and children, and I think she was 4 or 5, that little girl that was trying to get out of the flames. This is a Holocaust. I believe it's a Holocaust, and I've been calling it a Holocaust. And I just cannot understand how people don't want to find out, how they can listen to the BS of the mainstream media, legacy media, call it what you like. And the only government so far in the last couple of months that has taken a stand seems to be Spain. And now, they've been threatened by the bullies and our own government. It's despicable. Despicable. We don't expect anything from the British. We were the first people they had tried to annihilate, and they're still at it. And it's just, I find I'm nearly lost for words when I think of the paramedics and the first responders that were responding to a call, and they had their lights flashing on their vehicles, assassinated by the Zionists, and only that one of the paramedics filmed on his phone the whole thing for 5 minutes. And the media lied, and with the Israelis, the media just repeat the lies. They're never questioned. It's unbelievable. And only for that footage, those lies would have stuck. So I think it's our duty as human beings to stand up and to speak out, because it's just, there are no words really to describe just how shocking it is.
Thank you, Deirdre. Thank you. And I think what you've touched on is that maybe one of the most revolutionary things anyone can do is, first of all, speak out, to speak the truth. Why do you think maybe, like you mentioned, Deirdre, some people, this sort of reticence or inability to speak out, what do you think does that say about the nature of our society, and how can we manage to overcome that reticence, silence, or fear? Sometimes it's fear.
Yeah, I think there's an apathy there, and there's also, this belief, oh, that's happening there, but people don't join up the dots. They don't look at fascism that's on the rise. And we don't have to go any further than our own country to see that. And, you know, it's, the disadvantaged on both sides of the spectrum here have joined forces in hate and are blaming people, from another country, international people, like the amount of international workers in the hospital that I work in and the amount of racism, it's absolutely unbelievable. And yet these people on the street, if they were taken into hospital in the morning for surgery or for treatment, the likelihood is that they would be treated by an international worker. So we have a very long, hard fight on our hands. Very long.
Absolutely. And I think that even raises the issue of this being a class war, that really it's about maybe the lack of class consciousness there and capitalism. The system has done
Yeah.
a very good job at scapegoating. It's always look there, look everywhere, but at the root cause. And the root cause of all of this stems from capitalism and imperialism. So divide and conquer is the classic technique to divide us all. And yeah, what were known as enemies or nationalists, loyalists, Catholics, Protestants fighting
Yeah.
each other. Now, it's really sad to see that, well, that still continues, that we don't have a united working class front. So I think when workers understand the nature of the system, then maybe they start to realize that the migrant isn't the person stealing all of the cookies. It's the multi-billionaire Epstein class that are very,
The
very
Epstein,
powerful.
regime,
Mhm.
absolutely. The Epstein regime, and also, the government is keeping people, or the media and the government keeping people, well, the media is the mouthpiece of all the governments, keeping people ignorant. And it's the fact that people don't seem to want to know where to find the truth that's so disturbing.
Mm.
And that they can't that they can't look at our history and other countries' history and join the dots, the imperialism, the whole. It's just, that's what's so sad in all of this.
Mhm. It
Is,
is sad, but we have a good, there still is a good Republican understanding and revolutionary, it's still there. I think it really needs to be tapped into as well,
yeah, and to
go
be
back
broadened
to our
out.
roots and to be broadened out,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
and unity is key amongst our base, and we're going to have to separate and small differences and come together united as a working class anti-imperialist front. Uh,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
At this stage, and we'll probably come back because I'd say there are a lot of people here who would have questions for you, Deirdre, especially, and maybe I saw a few ears perking whenever I mentioned that you were involved in, yeah, the Birmingham Six and Guildford Four struggles. So I know that some people this side of the border might have questions for you, because we often bring up, our past in the
yeah,
north and the occupied six counties that, people down here admit to not maybe understanding the full story because they were fed the British imperialist narrative. So we might come back to you if that's okay. At
that's no
this
problem.
stage, thank you very much. And Dorothy, I'm going to bring you in at this stage. As everybody knows, who come often to the program, Dorothy has spoken before. Dorothy, you might even want to pick up from where Deirdre spoke and maybe tell us about your own involvement and the direction that you feel we need to go, that this movement needs to move. You often talk about we need to move beyond the narrative on Palestine and bring it back home, bring it local, and bring it back to organising at the grassroots. So if you could speak to that, it would be great. Or anything else that you feel is relevant for tonight's program. The floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you so much, Róisín, for having me on. Yeah, I feel yes, I certainly would love to follow on indeed from Deirdre, who I had the honour of marching into the Pro Cathedral in Dublin with there some time ago with
Oh,
the Doves group, which is I think where we first met. And as an ex-Catholic, I must say, but I it was a very proud moment when we walked into that cathedral and the what we were greeted with inside there was quite an eye opener to me, just the silence and the yeah, it was quite distressing. Actually, I felt very calm. Actually, I felt a calmness come over me. I hadn't been in a church for a long time, you know. But then as we stood there in the aisle, the reaction of the priest and the congregation, I was deeply disturbed as an ex-Catholic that this would have been my congregation. But I just wanted to mention that because that's when I first would have met Deirdre, and it was a very important thing that we did. I feel, first of all, as a Free Stater, I'd like to say that if Bobby Sands were alive today, it would be his 72nd birthday. So to pay tribute, because yes, we have been down here in the Free State, the supposedly Free State. We totally got propagandized. I've spoken about this before. And as a student of history, who went on to study it in college, I learned nothing until I left college. And all of these movements, this is what Gaza does, of course. I've spoken about this before. Gaza is the gift, it's the continuously giving gift that awakens us all up. And yes, we must move beyond. But the reason, I was thinking of like Bobby Sands died, well, he would be 72 today. And in 1972, which was the year I was born, Ghassan Kanafani, the great a Palestinian writer, activist, journalist, editor, amazing human being. He was murdered the same year that I was born. So that 72 just resonated with me today. And I will want to speak a little bit about the matriarchy and to explain that for me, men like Bobby Sands and Ghassan Kanafani are part of the matriarchy. And that it's important that we understand what matriarchy means. So maybe I'll start with that because this has been a learning that I have gained through Gaza as well. And this is about the seeing beyond into the new world, into the vision that we have to move towards. It is patriarchal, the society we live in. I didn't understand how ingrained that was in my own thought process. I didn't understand how much as a woman I was completely 100% part of the patriarchy, how I didn't understand that because as a white Western woman I had rights, that somehow women had rights when the vast 99% of women on the planet don't have rights. So, if we're going to repeat Mandela's, great saying that, none of us are free until Palestine are free, none of us have rights until every single woman on the planet have rights, has a right, has the same rights. I think that's really important, and I had forgotten that as a very privileged white Western woman. Um, and the matriarchy is really about, people think, I think sometimes when we speak about matriarchy, I think, and men perhaps, and I don't want them to feel in any way, threatened, because the patriarchy is about a pyramid. It's a pyramid of hierarchical rights, and there's people at the top and then you have everyone all the way down. But the matriarchy does not mean that we're just simply inverting that pyramid and then all the women are going to be into the positions of power and we're going to have, I don't know, I mean men as slaves or something daft, because I think people get threatened. Matriarchy is about actually just completely flatlining the pyramid. There is no pyramid. It is completely about coming back to community. And I think the one word I always think of when I think of matriarchy is the word nurturing. And that's why, as a woman, like life comes through women, just physically, right? We are the ones who physically give birth to life, and we are the ones who can physically feed life from our actual bodies. That is, I didn't even realize it really. That is such an amazing thing that we do. And that connects us to all of the humans on the planet. It connects us to all of the species on the planet, and it connects us to Mother Earth herself. So for me, my vision for the future of the world through Gaza is us to make those connections. we have to start speaking about this like this. This is the gift of Gaza. It has to wake us up. You know, I always say it's like Gaza is like the rupture in the world that is just letting all the light in. And we do talk about joining the dots, but my question that I would love everyone to go away with this evening is, do you really want to join all the dots? Because there's a lot of dots out there that people don't. And one of the huge big things for me is not just obviously human rights, it's also about the planet herself. We need to start speaking about her as a her, and giving her a persona, because when we speak about things as it, or we don't give them a sentience, we tend to degrade their importance. So to me, Mother Earth is a mother, and she is a she, and she is a living, breathing organism, and we all come from her. And unless we actually start tracing our roots back to her and really understanding that we've become this nasty capitalist, consumerist, exploitative society, we've completely lost our connections to the earth. And it's not about just taking a walk in the countryside along a man-made path, you know, through a forest that has man-made signs to tell you which way to go. You know, that's what we feel it is. It's actually not that. It's, you know, you should get up in the morning and go outside and stand in your bare feet in the cold dew of the grass. And it's amazing when you do that, the feeling that it gives you of the connections, and try to feel your connection with the earth. The other thing, of course, that you know Roisin knows about me is that I'm vegan. And my first awakening was actually to the rights of animals, to all sentient beings. So I've had like three awakenings in my activism, and I actually did a lot of I'm fairly new to the whole thing of Palestine, but I did a lot of animal rescue, both wildlife and domesticated animals for a few years, starting in about 2018 when I helped feed horses during the Beast from the East. That was my first wake up call. And through that, then I did a lot of wildlife rescue, a lot of horse rescue in Dublin and other counties, and everything that I have seen within animal rescue is what we've seen in Gaza. I've seen the most horrific things done by humans to animals, and I've always said, and I repeat, you know, I believe it in my heart. As long as we continue to do to animals what we do to them, we will continue to do it to humans, and vice versa. Because we all have a pyramid of who we think. You know, we all oppress somebody. And to me, that is what I'm trying to really, I think what we all need to learn, what I've been trying to learn is that, you know, we give out to the Zios because they oppress the Palestinians, but our lives are built actually on oppression. All of us oppress somebody, and we need to challenge ourselves. I think that's for me the challenge going forward within the Palestine movement, within all the movements, is that we need to challenge ourselves. It's not enough anymore. If we want a different world, if we want to see beyond Gaza, and it's not about leaving Gaza behind. I think people think sometimes it's about that. No, Gaza is our lifeblood. It's what keeps us all going in the fight. But for me, it's about seeing and wanting to build a new world. And we have to start thinking about like what world do we want to see in 100 years' time? Do we want our kids and our grandkids still standing outside Leinster House? Like, there's no point me standing outside the door on Wednesdays if I'm condemning future generations to doing it as well. And I think definitely then through Social Rights Ireland, I learned about the whole thing of capitalism. Definitely, I didn't understand about that until I started attending all the meetings here. So to me, it's about like joining all the dots and realizing that we need to look beyond everything. And like, what do you want to see in 500 years on the planet? I don't want to see any of this. I want it all gone. I want a world that looks nothing like this. I want structures that don't look like this. I don't want us to still be building houses made of cement and paving roads across landscapes. I want us to start really understanding the symbiotic relationship. And I think that's where, for me, that's where our activism must go. I know it sounds like a huge ask. I know it sounds maybe a little bit insane, but dreams always start off. I mean, somebody stood on the planet and looked up at the moon and thought about going there. And then we got there. I think you can never dream too big. So that's kind of yeah, so that's how I ended up. So first it was the animals, then it was Gaza, and then it was the patriarchy. They were my kind of, and I've written about this on Substack, they were my three awakenings, and they happened in that order. And we just gotta keep challenging ourselves and not be afraid I think, to challenge each other. I'll say one last thing. It was Susan Abel Hawa, the amazing Palestinian activist, actually, who, because I used to wonder about whether I could speak about animal rights, right? Because it's a thing that, people get very upset about and they get, and I woke up one morning and I used to follow her online, and obviously she's quite astounding. She's been in and out of Gaza, and she has even visited one of the animal rescues in Gaza that I wrote about in one of my poems, Salal Animal Rescue, and I never kind of tweaked. And one morning I was watching on my phone, and she was showing lots of stuff about Gaza in her feed, and then suddenly she was showing pigs in this metal, how we condemn them to live in these metal buildings. There are no free range pigs, by the way, in Ireland. They're all inside in horrific enclosures. And I thought first of all, oh, I must have gone on to something else, and then in my mind I kind of started joining the dots, and she's vegan, and I thought, okay, I remember breathing a sigh of relief and thinking, because I was afraid, and even now I feel a little nervous speaking about it within a space which is not about that. But she just looking at her online, and I didn't still do it for months and months after that. It took a long time even before I said it outside the door. And kudos to David Hickey, who will always never censor anybody, who will allow us all to speak about it. But I knew then that I could speak about any oppression. I think that we must be willing that oppression is oppression, no matter who you do it to. If they're sentient and they have feelings, the new world must embrace everybody. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you very much. I think what you're actually talking about is the outworkings of capitalism there, that is the nature of capitalism is exploitation and
Yeah,
extraction, at every
100%.
level. And even sadly, those who don't think that they're being exploited, it's done such a good job,
Mm,
in making us think that we are free to choose. And then this hyper individualism as well makes
yeah.
us, yeah. So yeah, we are victims, and it's about fighting that. But first of all, you've got to recognize that and take it right back. Like you say, learning about capitalism is something like you have to do a lot of unlearning as well, because it's not something that you're taught about in
Mm.
school. In fact, you're prepared for the capitalist world in school.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. And what's so brilliant about you is that you're, saying that this isn't just about the single issue of Palestine. We need to now go beyond that. Thanks, Dorothy. And there will be questions, I imagine, for you. So thank you. I'm going now to go to Carmel Delaney. So, Carmel, you're very welcome here. And, Carmel, I have maybe three specific questions for you, if that's okay, just about how you got involved in activism, in political activism in the first instance. What's it like organising in tech? Because a lot of us, even though I'm based in Dublin, I haven't a clue what it's like. I hear things about, yeah, tech workers. So I'd just love to hear what it's like from a tech worker's perspective and trying to organise inside that environment. And then what do you think, Carmel, is the priority for us to focus on um, right now in this moment in time?
Thanks, Róisín. That's a lot to get through. I'll try not to be too long, and I'll try to be reasonably articulate. But thank you, first of all, for inviting me on. I'm with three very, very esteemed speakers here, so I really feel, the imposter syndrome. But I do also realize that we have to push ourselves. So none of us really want to do this. And I think but we need to, right? And so I am drawn to this now, and that's it. It's Palestine for life. So I got involved October 7th. I started to see what was happening there. I couldn't believe it. I kept thinking every day, surely the system will stop this. Surely international law, our leaders, everyone will step in, and it'll be, we'll rein it in or whatever. Kept getting worse and worse and worse. I think I started to realize then, seeing the difference on social media between how regular media was portraying it. And I was like, what's happening here? So I started to get on every platform. I got on Twitter, I got on Instagram, I got on LinkedIn, I got on Facebook and TikTok. And I wanted to see for myself. And I think that's where I developed my real sort of critical thinking and discernment. and I started to see what was being portrayed to the people through the BBC and RTE and CNN, and through what was the reality on the ground. And again, gobsmacked, couldn't believe it, was completely in my own little world, I think, before that, but was reasonably, I would say, open-minded and aware. I lived abroad for 16 years. I only moved home 3.5 years ago. And I lived in South Korea for 3 years teaching English, and then I was in Sydney for 12 years. And in Sydney, which I honestly don't know if I could ever go back and live in a settler colony again. I don't know how I would have coped if I was living there when October 7th happened. And I don't know if any of you have been following what Anthony Albanese and the Australian government, their reaction has just been horrific, absolutely horrific. So, yeah, talk about depressing. So, when I lived abroad, I think I had a privilege, I was privileged. I didn't really, politics didn't really affect me, I suppose. And I had never really had a strong belief in party politics because I was thinking, right, well, you get somebody in and they, make the necessary changes or updates to the system, improve people's lives. And then 5 years later, somebody else comes in and changes the whole thing again. I'm like, that's not sustainable. That's not efficient. You wouldn't have that in a company. Um, and then just looking at America, I mean, the right and left, supposed to divide the Democrat and Republicans. I was more interested in that side because that's pure Hollywood. Like that's pure just entertainment. Irish politics was so boring. But now I realize that actually we are a little bit more, we were a lot more left in a way than the US and the UK. And so after coming back 3.5 years ago, I am so happy to be home. Whereas I always wanted to leave. I'd growing up with this colonized mentality of America is the be all and the end all. And I was from the age of 16 wanted to live in New York, wanted to go abroad, live in the big cities, and I did. I lived there, and it was fun. It was nice, but I am never been happier to be back in Ireland, and I'm so grateful to Palestine that I'm now connecting to my, our indigenous roots, I suppose, and getting back to our land and our. I did a shaman course, a workshop on shamanism in Mayo there a few weeks ago. So I'm really relearning Gaelga and all this kind of um, a whole new understanding of the the north of Ireland issues there. So yeah, look, I've been on a massive decolonization journey myself. Palestine was my awakening, and it'll always be my number one, close to my heart. Then it was sort of white Western supremacy, and capitalism, and then patriarchy. So myself and Dorothy are very close. We speak most days, multiple times a day. So I'm very aligned with her and coming at it from a different angle, right? So I'm not a vegan, but I think that's where I'm going to aim towards. And I have learned so much from Róisín and Social Rights Ireland group. I think more so than any other group that I'm part of. I'm part of a huge number of just different campaigns, I suppose, trying to understand what's going on from the different sides. But with work, then I work in an American tech company, and I transferred over here from Sydney, in the same place for 6 years. And I said to my boss initially when I started speaking out on LinkedIn, I said, I don't care if I lose my job over this because this is that important. And he is in London, and he was okay with that. He was like, you're entitled to your political views, just as long as it doesn't affect the company or whatever. So I spoke out a lot on LinkedIn, posting constantly, reposting, resharing, commenting on politicians, like European politicians. Did that for about 2 years, realized this isn't working. I was hoping that with my full name, my job title, my company, it might influence other employees to speak up, especially in Ireland, where it's relatively safe. We're very privileged, way more so than especially the US, to be able to speak up. But it wasn't happening. People are much too, either in fear or they don't want to shake their privilege in any way. And so I kind of, I think we always need to, in these kind of movements, recalibrate and reset and say, right, this hasn't worked. I need to try something different. And so I knew that by speaking on LinkedIn, what am I going to do? Continue doing that for another 3 years? Continue going to protests every month? It's kind of the same vibe. Um, but I don't want to diss anybody who is going to protest. That's very, very important as well. But for me, it's not where I am anymore. And I need to create and I need to build something. And I work in tech, but I'm not technical. I'm in sales. People think, oh, tech is so daunting and so complicated. Yeah, it is. But people who are even technical within tech, they are not across everything. They're only in one little part of it. So don't ever be intimidated by tech, right? Tech is this system and the tool that we will use to build the alternative system. And one of the greatest groups out there, I think, is Tech for Palestine. I don't know if you've heard of Tech for Palestine. That's going to be one of my, I think, priorities going forward is to work with them. They have 20,000 volunteers all over the world. You can come to them with an idea and they will help you to develop that idea and to fund that idea even if you have to. So I think we need to start coming together and start thinking about creating the alternative system. Capitalism is dead and gone. It's gone. There's no way we can survive going forward the way we have. I mean, and there's lots of hope, but the hope lies with the people, not with the systems, not with our leaders. Forget about it. We've tried. We've been there. Look at the resilience of the Palestinian people, and that's all we need to know for the future. So I am very hopeful, not for the current systems, the current leaders, but for what we are creating amongst ourselves. So I'll go back to you there, Róisín.
Thank you very much, Carmel. Great to hear that. And very honest, very, very honest to say, like, I wasn't always in this space or in this place, but by God, you're a fast learner, Carmel, anyway.
Well, thanks to you, Róisín. Thanks to you.
That willingness to
Yeah.
open your mind. It's like Dorothy, you spoke about, if you can't imagine it, that creates hopelessness. Because if you can't imagine an alternative way of living, well, then you will fall into despair and go, oh God, we're all doomed. Whereas if you have the ability to keep your mind open and go, we could do this, we can live like this, we'd be better off. Like Paul and me, we had a conversation at the weekend up in Cultureland, just saying, we could have 3 holidays. We'd be better off. We will actually be better off. The working class and the poorest will be better off without the friggin' Epstein class and the billionaires. So it's lovely to hear you say that, Carmel, and to imagine and to work, because that gives that hope sort of trickles up. I don't mean trickles down, it emanates. It emanates and others will feed off that. Thanks very much, Carmel. And again, hang on if you can. I know you've wains to get to bed, but let them.
No, my husband's doing. But yeah,
Oh,
just in the words of Zoolander, I think it was, if you can dream it, you can do it.
yeah.
Right. So it is cheesy, but we can. Right?
Yeah.
We can. Yeah.
Thanks, Carmel. And now over to you, Patricia. Patricia, I listened to you on Saturday. Patricia was speaking up in Cultureland for a talk on, there was a panel of 4 great speakers, and the I think the title was Women Under Imperialism. Patricia, and you brought in Marianne McCracken up at home, and how she had that wonderful ability to unite the working class. As well. And Patricia, I know that when you spoke about her and you spoke about today, how we need to get over the sectarian ideas, particularly in the north, or this notion, that there's a division between there's no division. The division is the class division. The them and the us is the workers. and the Epstein class. So, Patricia, I'd love to invite you to just maybe, if you want to speak about Saturday, because it was brilliant, and those who weren't there might benefit from hearing the gist even of what you spoke about.
Well, thank you. And I have to say, I really enjoyed listening to Carmel and Dorothy and Deirdre. And I'm actually going to walk through the principles of the democratic programme. The Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum launched a programme for the hang on, I've got it here in front of me, a democratic programme for a new century. And it was launched on the centenary of the first democratic programme in, I was going to say 2019, 1919. So if I could just walk through them briefly, I have them here in front of me. And actually, there's a lot in this that is that Dorothy and Carmel and Deirdre touched on. So if you don't mind, just stay with me for a moment. For a democratic Ireland, we participate in the People's Dáil gathered to celebrate the century of the first Dáil Éireann, are of the belief that full democracy and the democratic expression of the people, of the people's will must be the foundation of democracy. It is clear that the Irish state and its institutions are not accountable to the people, but rather are the product of and serve the interests of those who have wealth and economic power. Democratic control of all institutions and decisions within those institutions that affect people's lives must be accountable to the people at all times, whether at the local or the national level. This democracy must be extended to our places of work and to all social and cultural spheres of life. In a new democratic Ireland, every citizen must have full participation in all decisions affecting their family, community, and place of work. This will require a radical and fundamental change in how our country is run and how we as citizens govern rather than be governed. And motion 2 for a neutral Ireland, and this is very relevant in 2026. A democratic Ireland would be neutral and non-aligned. We oppose involvement in any and all military structures. We oppose the use of any part of our country by aggressive military alliances such as NATO or PESCO. A democratic Ireland would be a beacon of solidarity and hope for the billions of oppressed peoples struggling under imperial domination and control. A democratic Ireland would promote global solidarity and justice and mutually beneficial economic trading relations. It would not engage in the oppression of other people or nations, economically, militarily, or culturally. A democratic and free Ireland would never collude with others in the exploitation of the resources of people or other nations. The global environment, and I think you like this one, Dorothy, the economic system imposed upon us, monopoly capitalism, is plunging our planet and the very survival of hundreds of millions of people around the globe into an environmental abyss, a catastrophe that we may well never recover from. We need to end the destruction of the environment by global corporations and to challenge the subservient politicians and governmental systems. It is only in the controlling of and ultimately the breaking up of these global monopolies and in instituting an economic system that is centred on the needs of the people, one that is environmentally sustainable and in which the profit motivation is removed and we can hope to save our planet. Partition was the most grave and anti-democratic act imposed upon our people by Britain and its allies. Partition can only be addressed by confronting its role in denying democracy in both parts of Ireland, producing the carnival of reaction that colony foresaw north and south. We are affirmed in our belief that only the working class people of Ireland have the selfless interest to end partition and unite our people. We resolve to strengthen the unity of people's organisations on a national basis and to support campaigns and solutions that strengthen the unity of our people in an all-Ireland struggle, in line with the historic traditions of Tone, Colony and Pearse. We oppose all manifestations of sectarianism and division and oppose all groups and forces that wish to sow further divisions among our people. And we don't have to look very far to see who is sowing divisions at the moment, as the far right are galvanising, and we don't have to ask who's funding them and who is driving them. Motion 5, people's ownership. We reject the narrow concept of democracy that confines the people's participation to a formal vote every 4 or 5 years. We believe that all the means of producing the necessities of life, all natural resources, both land and sea, should be owned and controlled by and for the people of Ireland, to be used only in a sustainable way to enhance the social and cultural development of our people, and not for the profit of a tiny elite or transnational corporations. It is the people's wealth and should therefore be owned by us. And last but not least, motion 6, cherishing all the children of the nation equally. That a democratic Ireland should be one in which everyone can enjoy the fruits of their labour, in which to grow and develop to their fullest potential, free from discrimination because of their gender, sexuality, ethnicity, race or religion. Priority should be given to enhancing the social and cultural development of every citizen equally, with economic and social development spread evenly throughout our country to enhance the capacity of people to live sustainable lives wherever they choose to live. And I think it's important that I highlight those principles, because when people talk about or hear about the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum, they might think, well, who are they? But I think it's really important that we get these principles were not agreed upon in one day. We worked on this for a few years. We had very successful conferences, very well attended conferences, and all of these principles were agreed upon. And I just think it covers everything that we've been talking about here today. And I think that the only people who couldn't agree with these principles surely has to be the corporations, the Epstein class, and the likes. So, Sinead, that's me for now.
Thank you very much, Patricia. And I think that's really important because, again, many people may have been coming to these meetings, programs, and maybe not realizing that a program for government exists. And it's not a new thing. It existed from 2019, and a lot of work went into it, and a lot of brains, a lot of, people who know what they're talking about, lived experience, but also theoretical knowledge and understanding. Deep, we've got thinkers behind this. And sometimes when people are lost for what would it be or what are we for, a lot of people know what they're against. What are we for? It's in that booklet and it's been shared with you, and it really is worth reading and understanding, because we won't be directionless when we have a program for government for a workers' republic. We're not directionless, it's there. And yeah, if people disagree with it, it would be great to come back and say, well, what are the issues? I think there won't be anybody here or from the working class anyway who would disagree with it. At this point, we always bring in a panelist from the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum and someone from Social Rights Ireland. So I think before we finish up the recording, I'd like to invite Tommy or Barry perhaps and Stephen to just respond to these four brilliant activists tonight. Have you anything to say, any comments, even any questions from an analytical point of view? Barry, go ahead.
I think that it's important that women understand that, it has been thought about. There isn't actually a theory and understanding as to why women find themselves discriminated against and how that came about and why it happened. I think that's an important thing that people get to understand. And a man who wrote about it was a man called Frederick Engels. And his analysis showed that the family was a constructed institution to facilitate male inheritance. And it was built alongside the development of private property. Because prior to feudalism and prior to capitalism, property was communally owned in a lot of cases. Now, it's not exact. It's not an exact science, but that is a broad picture. And as a consequence of private property being developed, the marriage and the household was linked to the developments, especially linked to the development of capitalism. And as a consequence, women became subjugated within the family home. And another part of that was inheritance, especially in the wealthier classes. Inheritance was important because they wanted to keep the now privatized property within the family. And the father became the head of the family, and it was him that had the ability to transfer property mostly to the eldest son, and very seldom to the daughters. Now that has changed, but we have to understand that it was property and the development of property and capitalism that resulted in women being disenfranchised. And then the state was developed to protect the property and its owners. And of course, that drove a new class-based patriarchal order, and laws and rules and regulations were developed to protect and drive that forward. And it's a thing that, people everybody can kind of say, well, women are discriminated against, and women can understand clearly that they're discriminated against. but they might never know exactly how it came about or why. And I think that's important. And oddly enough, in Ireland, in the 7th and 8th century, under the Brehon laws, women had full marital rights and could divorce men and had access to full-time education. And they could be doctors or take up any kind of a professional career. And women were not viewed as property as they began to be viewed in later centuries. And when they got divorced, if they got divorced, they got a share of, they got to retain their own property and also a share of the joint property. And it was you're talking about the 7th and 8th centuries. It was a serious advance compared to what it's even like today in many parts of the world, and indeed even in the so-called developed world. Physical abuse, for example. A woman could make a claim for compensation to the value of the property that she brought to the marriage. And in pregnancy, a woman had the legal right to food, extra food, and especially food for her food cravings that she might experience during pregnancy. And she was even allowed to steal to satisfy those pregnancy cravings and couldn't, and it wasn't a legal offence. But I mean, again, those are the sort of talking points. But I mean, women's power was again, especially as time went on, centuries developed, women's power was linked to their family status within society. In other words, I mean, it was a class issue, just as it's a class issue today. So it's something that women, I think, should, especially politically active women, should develop and read about the family and where it fits within society and how it came about that it disenfranchised women. It's a very important area to understand that there's actually a rationale for it, that it didn't just appear out of space.
Exactly. It's not natural at all.
It's not natural, no.
Not natural.
And congratulations to all the women speakers. They are all very, very good.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you. Just thinking I got pregnant in the wrong time. Free food for your craving.
There's never a good time to get pregnant.
Well, I think the church really was the big oppressor in Ireland.
Yeah, well, the church took the side of power, you see.
Yeah.
That's why you have to link it back to the materialist issues. The church, in fact, not alone the Catholic Church, but 99.9% of churches throughout the world link their existence to power. You'll find very few main church bodies, especially opposing power directly, and they certainly won't oppose capitalism. They certainly are not. They certainly won't be looking for a new people-powered socialist Ireland. That's for certain. So that's where it comes from. I mean, they're affected by it too. I mean, they choose to take the side of oppression, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you, Barry, and thanks, Deirdre, for bringing that up. We're still living with the legacy of the church for the mother and baby survivors, all of that.
Exactly.
Stephen, I'm going to bring you in to respond as well, maybe Dara as well, because we've been focusing on, Iran a lot and maybe trying to counter some of the narratives. Are you still there, Stephen? Oh yeah, you are. And also, would you just in response to the four panelists tonight as well, any comments or observations?
Sure. Thanks, Róisín. Yeah, I mean, it really brought me back listening to Deirdre and Dorothy, and also Carmel mentioning, those early days in October 23, when you have your heart in your mouth and you're watching what's unfolding and thinking this can't be true, this is going to end soon, somebody will step in. Even I think most of us probably didn't have a great deal of faith in the system, but we had some shred, and that just got worn away. And probably the most the most hypocritical aspect, or the kind of the aspect of the West that it had vaunted for so long, was seeing itself as a protector of women's rights, um, and then to see this unprecedented attack on families, entire extended families obliterated, targeted deliberately, and everything to do with care, everything to do with the values of women and of children, of protection, everything that we associate with that was deliberately targeted. It was almost as though this was the purpose, was to invert our morality. And yet at the same time, the West continues like a zombie to parade its respect for women's rights. And we see it unfolding again with Iran, with this new war in Iran. The fact that they have the fucking chutzpah after 3 years of genocide in Gaza, that it's, like that they can then somehow use women's rights as a pretext for this latest. Again, war is probably not even the right word, because it is. You can see that the way that the United States and Israel is waging this war is genocidal again, targeting civilian centers. They hit a flour factory. They hit, obviously, those oil depots yesterday. And it's not only a misrepresentation of the reality in Iran, but it's a very, very cynical psyop on people in the West that they've been perpetrating for years, not just against Iran, against the whole Muslim culture, the Muslim world. The idea that they are somehow backward, they don't respect women, they don't respect gay people, and we are more advanced than them, and ultimately it'll be upon us to defeat them or civilize them, or take your pick. And of course, the reality of Iran is very, very different, like you said, Róisín, at the start. I was just looking into some statistics today, and it's true that women's participation in the workforce is considerably lower in Iran than, let's say, in Ireland. But that's also because it's not unlike Gaza. It's quite a traditional society in many ways. It's very family oriented. People live in extended families. So women, by and large, tend to, at least in rural areas and more traditional areas, to work in the home. But one thing that is absolutely undeniable that the Islamic Revolution has done is that it has extended education to women, like far beyond. Like literacy levels, female literacy levels in 1979 were somewhere in the 40%. And I would assume that pretty much all of that was in the big cities. And now it's at 99%, so they have full literacy. And then female participation in all levels of education, but particularly in higher education, and particularly in the areas of higher education where here in the West, you've got quite low female participation: engineering, science, technology. In all of these things, Iran has very high levels of women's participation. So it's far more nuanced. It's not that, I realize this is a psyop, so there's no point really in arguing with the psyop. It's a bit like arguing with the Zionist troll on Twitter. You're not even sure if it is a real troll. It could just be a bot. But the real argument then is with the people who, among us, the people that, Deirdre talked about at the start, the people that you're sharing, or Dorothy mentioned as well, in the church, the people that you, until Gaza, considered your peers, your community, your fellows. We are affected by this psyop, where it does, you see it in the RTE, the way they frame so many things are to do with Iran, to do with the Muslim world. And of course, in one way, amid the horror of Gaza, one of the things that certainly revealed to me, I was often so awestruck by the level of social cohesion, by the deep sense of family cohesion, by the solidarity that people showed for one another, by the courage. And I often had to ask myself if our society was under this kind of bombardment, this kind of assault, would we show the same dignity? Would we be capable of the same resilience? And I think again that the same psyops are being played again and again, and it's happening again with Iran. And what can you hope? More and more people wake up that it doesn't seem to be working as well as before, even just judging by American media, by the number of voices speaking up against the war. Yeah, it is hopefully the empire on its last legs. That's all we can hope for. And then this cynical instrumentalization of women's rights can actually give rise and give way to a form of gender equality that isn't actually just a tool of oppression in itself. Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Thank you for coming in there. I know you're double jobbing there, you're taxiing children around the place, and thanks for your contribution. We might actually, I'm looking at the time, we might finish up the recording and then do the questions, answers. Dara, if you can hold that thought, Morgan as well. I know you want to come in. There might be questions for our panelists. So, and Emma, I think you're like me, you need to get the kids to bed. And we invited Emma to sing us out, to end this recording, but it won't be the end of the conversation for anyone who wants to stay on. Certainly I have a few questions for our panel, for our guest speakers. So Emma, if you are ready now to sing us out. Emma, I don't know if you recognize Emma. You're looking different. You look like a proper musician today, like in a recording studio. But Emma has sang many a Wednesday alongside Dorothy at the Dubs for Palestine demo at Leinster House. And I put up a beautiful recording of you singing again, no musical accompaniment or anything, on Instagram. So it's the same song, Never Again. Thanks, Emma.
Thanks, Róisín. I wonder, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay. So I'm singing Dorothy's poem from, I don't know if you can see this, her book 300 Days and Counting, Poems for Gaza. And it's called Nakba, Never Again. Never again came back again. Never again came back again. Never, never again came back again. 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 Never, never again came back again, never again, came back again. Now I know where the truth lies. All this time it's been hiding from us, knowing what it might do once revealed. Blowing to shreds our minds, our bodies, the essence of who we are, again and again and again. There will always be again. Never again came back again. Never again came back again. Never, never again came back again. 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 Never, never again came back again. Never again is back again. Yeah. Thanks a million. Thanks, Róisín, and thanks to all the speakers.
Thank you so much, Emma, for joining us, for continuing, and to all our beautiful, powerful, and important activists, to Deirdre, to Dorothy, to Patricia, to Carmel. Thank you for joining us, for speaking. I know you could speak much longer. 10 minutes isn't very long to talk, but you did a great job. And thank you to all the men and women who joined us this evening. I hope you'll come back next Monday for another programme with Social Rights Ireland and the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum. Thank you.